everyone. Welcome to the third episode of the Y Access Pod. I am your host, Tristan Ivor, and today I have a very awesome guest with me, Dan Dinh, one of my best friends and also the founder of TSM, which is one of the largest esports teams in the world. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. Known Tristan for a long time. Great dude. Very happy to be here.
Amazing. I know that we can take this one in a lot of different fashions because we know each other well enough that we kind of know each other's interests and the things we care about.
hmm
But I'll start a little bit more traditionally, and then we can branch off from there. But I want to know why gaming. I mean, it was still is such a big part of your life, but it led your life for so long. How did you end up there?
Gaming. Oh man. I think as far as I can remember, I think like one of my earliest memory, I must have been like two or three. We had a little Nintendo in a little house, I think like a three-bedroom house that we shared with 12 people. And I remember my uncle playing Tetris and, Chess Master, and they're playing, and I'm like, let me play, let me play. It's like, no, no, you don't know how to play games. And then, I wait and I watch them. And then when they walk away, I go back at the cartridge, blow on it, stick it back in. And you have like this 3-year-old trying to play Chess Master and Tetris. Um, and I think like the idea is like just from as early as I can remember, my family is just that's kind of how we socialize, right? You have a game cartridge, you play. Obviously, there wasn't a lot of multiplayer game back then. It's usually like a one-on-one type game or just like story-based, like a Mario side scroller. And you kind of just gather around the TV, watch each other play, and say, "Oh, you just died. It's my turn," and you kind of fight for it. And as games got a little bit more complex, you have like the Street Fighters and the Mortal Kombat. Um, the way you kind of play and stay in is if you win, everybody wants to play you. And so, just like it's like a lifelong journey from as far as I can remember. Um, stepped up through that journey. StarCraft came out. I was in like sixth grade, got like terribly addicted to it. The way we played back then was we had two computers and we ran phone lines and we connected to each other's computer. Not even on the internet, like local area network, not with the Ethernet cable, with a phone cable. That was wild. Graduated into, Warcraft, Dota, obviously League of Legends 2009. Never really intended to play professionally or start an esports team or stream on Twitch. I think I was one of the fortunate people that, as clueless as I was in college and uncertain of what I can do, where I want to be, I was very lucky. I fell into gaming, into the League of Legends ecosystem when there was only 300 players, and was able to kind of grow with it as it grew, right? It's really easy to be like, hey, you're the best player in League of Legends when there's 300 players. Had a big head start, maintained that rank one, rank two, top of the ladder when there's like 1,000, 10,000, a million. And it really kind of, it's a lot of being at the right place at the right time, with a lot of like history and experience in like gaming that allowed me to kind of like, get a little bit of a leg up on other people, right? I don't think you hear a lot from people in gaming or professional gaming. It's like, oh yeah, I grew up playing video games, but I'm a little bit older. Growing up culturally, gaming wasn't really cool yet. If anything, they're like, oh, you're a nerd. There's the meme of like the Cheetos on your fingers and whatnot. And I was gaming when, the perception was I was a basement dweller. And so just very glad I got addicted to the one thing that actually worked.
Which was League of Legends or just games in general?
Just games in general. I feel like I'm a lifelong gamer. I still play way too much today. I put it behind the guise of market research and R&D. It's like, hey man, I'm playing games because, like this is my industry. I run an esports team. I'm making a video game. I need to play a lot of games to understand. But really, like, even if I don't get paid for it, or if it's not my job, I think I'm gonna be playing, for the rest of my life. And I think that's how we interact socially, anyways, right? I've heard so many stories of, kids in middle school, kids in high school, them and their best friends. They play League of Legends, PUBG, Fortnite together from school, and then they move away and they're like, oh my gosh, my best friend's moving away. I can't hang out with him. And video game is a great way. to keep in touch with your friends and your family, and it's really good for maintaining that relationship. And I think we're becoming more global as a society, and I think it's great to be able to interface with people on a deeper level than just like, hey, send a text, how are you doing, what's up. You jump in a game, and I feel like working together to solve something difficult or go into war and win a really hard fought battle, it maintains a really good relationship and a bond.
Yeah, I can really resonate with that. I moved a lot as a kid, but I always had my RuneScape friends, and that stayed consistent no matter where I was, which I think was really helpful. But I'm curious, when did this go from being something you just really enjoyed, you were addicted to, or putting countless hours into the phases that started allowing it to be a business or a livelihood?
Yeah, I was senior year 2009. I was finishing up my last semester of college. League of Legends just came out. I think I was putting in like way too much time playing every day. Then I got to me and my brother actually at the time were ranked 1 and 2. We were on like probably like 100 something game win streak. Something stupid, right? It's just like people just couldn't beat us. It just doesn't matter. Um, and then we got known in the community as, oh, dude, these guys are like two sick fucks in League of Legends. If you want to learn League of Legends, you should go like, reach out to these guys. People would reach out to us on social media, on the forums, and say, hey, Dan, Andy, you're really good at the game. Can you coach us? Um, like I started coaching people for like $5 an hour, and people were like, oh, wow, that's a good deal. I'm a kid, really wasn't making a lot of money. I'm doing things I enjoy anyways. And I was like, oh, $5 an hour is great. And then the demand started climbing, and I'm like, shit, I want to actually play games. I don't want to really coach for like 5 hours a day. Um, like these other guys, I'm turning away. It's like, well, I'll pay you $10 an hour. I was like, I go back to the $5 guys. Like, hey man, these guys are paying me 10. I really only want to coach a couple, and they're like, oh, well, I'll pay you 10 too. And then I think after like a month, they went from like 5 to 10 to 15 to like 25. Started coaching League of Legends, and I'm like, still at $25 an hour. I don't want to coach that much. What's the best way to like, impart this knowledge to the hundreds of people that ask me? And so I started a little blog, and I would go on once a day or once every couple of days, write a little blog article on this is how you play the specific character. This is how you do the runes and masteries to optimize for your playstyle. This is the right mindset that you go into. And the reader and the viewership started climbing. It went from I think a couple hundred readers the first day to a couple thousand to tens of thousands. And I'm like, oh wow, there's a lot of people reading this. Just kind of doing it as a service. And I thought, what happens if I put like an AdSense ad on it? It's like, oh wow, I just got like $4 today. What happens if I put 2 ads on it? It's like, oh, it just doubled to 8. And then, the AdSense, as I put more ads on it, I know like people hate ads, but as I put more ads and as the viewership grew, we went from $5 a day, $10 a day, 20. Eventually, we started our own website, just a basic Envision power boards for those of you that know like V boards and IVP. Um, and then we just kind of grew from there, a couple hundred to a couple thousand to a couple 100,000 to a couple million, and I think we're right around like the 10 million mark right now. And just kind of stumbled into it step by step, really building that business one step at a time, learning how to, get a domain name, set up servers. I think I got like a Fat Cow server. I don't know if you guys know Fat Cow back then. And then I did my own like server. I did my own like server admin. I like rented like a computer inside a data center, set up Linux, set up the load balancing on it, and ran a website. And I'm like this little kid, never done it before, but you know, um, you look ahead one step at a time, and you're like, okay, how do I make this better? How do I make it a better experience? How can I make the website support more people? How do I make it lag less? How can I make it so the people learn the content better? And it's just through like little micro optimizations and learning one step at a time that it just kind of kept on growing. I'd never had a big or a grand vision. It's more of I look at the problem in front of me. How do I solve it? And how do I make it better?
And before continuing on that story, why do you think League specifically took off as it did? I mean, there are similar games. Dota is a very similar play format. What was it about League that made it the phenom that it is now?
Yeah, so if you look at it at the time, we were doing actually market research just independently, not because we're building anything, just because we're really deep in the Dota community. At the time, there's already 22 million Dota All-Stars player. The matchmaking experience is bad. The way you find a game is you say, hey, let's go into custom map, and then you sort for Dota, and then you look at the tag or the title of the game. It's like 5v5 blind pick or like all random or all strength. And then you jump in a game and then you have these add-ons that look at people's pings and it's like, okay, this guy's ping is bad. I'm gonna leave. I don't want to play in this game. You jump in and out and then you play a game, you jump and you start and you get like 5 griefers and you're like, oh my gosh, this is stupid. And then you leave and you do it all over again. So while the mode was extremely popular and there's a huge and tremendous player base, like I think it was one of those things where in hindsight it was so obvious. You have this big genre, this big mod from a big game that just has a tremendous user base, but the matchmaking experience, the leaderboard experience, the social experience was so bad. Um, like you needed to do basically absolutely nothing, and all you had to do is I'm gonna solve for Lame, I'm gonna solve for friends list, I'm gonna solve for matchmaking, and then you have, success. And you've seen that with League of Legends, and then you see that with Dota 2, right? Dota 2 is just basically copy paste of Dota 1 initially, and it still blew up. I think the other argument is like, hey, there was Han as well, and there was League of Legends. Why did Han die out in League of Legends? I didn't look too deep into it, but I felt like League of Legends, the way the art and the playstyle, it's people say it's dumbed down, but it's changed. So I felt like it was more accessible to newer players because any type of MOBA, right? I think one of the hardest things is, hey, how do you onboard yourself to this genre? It's super, super hardcore. The depth of knowledge to start, even as the beginner, is really high. And I think for Han, it was even higher. And for Dota, you're specifically just siphoning off of existing Dota players. So it wasn't that big of a leap.
Got it. That makes a ton of sense. So interesting how something small like that, well, what seems small in retrospect could make one of the largest games in the world. And so you guys started getting all these views on your blog. You started having all these people coming in. You were getting ad revenue for the first time. You were still in college at this time, is that right?
I was in college last semester. Andy he had just dropped out of high school and finished his GED, and he's taking college classes at a community college.
And how did it roll out from there? It's crazy because you went from having this website that a lot of people are looking at and finding interesting to having a multi-$100 million esports team. I know there's years of work in that intermission, but
Yeah,
how does that process start? Like, how do you even go from the website to that?
yeah, well, I'll break it down. First, it was a blog. It was making like $100 a day. Not really significant, right? You extrapolate it over a year, that's like 30K. You're not going to survive two people off 30K, and then there's like server costs and whatnot, and it's not that exciting. What happened is we started the website. The website grew to hundreds of thousands of viewers, and then Andy had this idea hey, I'm gonna hire somebody and I'm gonna do a user-generated guide content platform. You create like a system to help streamline for other people to make guides. Because I think at the time it was just me and Andy writing 100% of the guide, and then we hit up our friends that are really good. It's like, hey man, can you write a guide for us as a favor? We're like, hey, I'll pay you $50 if you write a guide for us on our website. And then we still did that, but we created a platform that allowed and made it easier for people to create guides. So what we did was like, hey, what's a skeleton and what's a process to making a guide? What do people care about? And then we streamlined that process, and then we went out and talked to like people that are really good at specific champions or like other people that are like pro level and say, hey, I've removed every single process. I just have somebody that interviews you. You talk to somebody for 30 minutes and you make a guide. And so we can kind of condense that structure and automated it and put it into a website so anybody can make a website. And all we needed to worry about was let's look at the guides that people make. Let's have a rating system, sort of like Reddit, where if there's a good guide, people can vote it up and it floats to the top. And so it's more about making it easy for people to create content and finding a system that makes it so good content surfaces. And that grew it from a couple 100,000 users per month to a couple million. We didn't really realize we struck gold until I think on AdSense we're making like 5,000 a month by then. And we weren't experienced. We weren't really optimizing it in hindsight. Knowing what I know now, that should have been like 20, 30,000 a month, right? Um, what ended up happening was we had an inbound from a company called Area Games at the time. They reached out to us and said, "Hey, we're releasing a game soon. We want to buy out ads on the front page of your website for a month. We're willing to pay you $30,000." And we're like, "Holy shit!" Like I think Andy was 17 at the time, and he was taking a call with this guy, like a business guy, saying, "Hey, we want to buy ads on your website." I think 30K for a 17-year-old that had $2,000 in his bank account at the time. It's kind of mind blowing. I remember him taking we have like alcohol around the house, and so he took a shot of whiskey, he like drinks it, and then he like continues the call, uh, and we're like, holy shit, we're onto something. Um, and it just kind of kept on growing from there. Like how do we make better guides? How do you make systems that are better? The website evolved from user generated guides to basically systems generated guides. Over time, we went from just us writing guides to public writing guides, and we supplement that with like 50 content creators. It's like, hey, we're gonna hire a content manager. He's gonna manage 50 content creators to make sure that there's always good guides that are coming in, and it became pretty complex in terms of like managing humans. Man, this sounds kind of bad with like the AI conversation, but um, right around like 2012, 2013, we had this idea of what would happen if all we care about are really good players or professional players, and then we look at them and see what they do. Let's cut out the bullshit and just dig down. Okay. People care about runes and masteries. They care about skilling up in what order, at what part of the game, and they care about the build orders of the item. Like what items do I build first, and what should my end game item build look like? And so we just made 200 League of Legends account, made 200 virtual machines on Linux, and then we just go in. And what we did is we had a database of like, here's the best like 10,000 players. What are they doing? And then we just basically use the bots to look up their profile on schedule every like hour and say, what are they doing? We take this and we condense it down and we make a database of you sort by the champions you want to play. These are the best players playing this champion today, right now, and this is what they're doing. And so all you do is you look at it, you glance at it, it's like, okay, cool. 30 seconds, I kind of know what I want to do in this game. And it blew up. We had a couple million users on that website too. And over time, it was called Pro Builds at the time. We continued to buy more websites. We bought champion.gg. That was like a match data aggregator to say, hey, I want to look at more than just professional players. I want to look at everybody. And then you take a pie out. It's like, hey, I am like a 20, let's say I'm a 50 to 75 percentile or like a 75 to 85 percentile. You create like little brackets and say, hey, I fit in this bracket. What are good players in this bracket doing? And what wins in this bracket? And so we're getting more like statistically relevant data to people's skill level. And so people can dive a little bit deeper. And so just like as we acquired more apps and as our product evolved, we finally came to Blitz. Along that journey, what people don't realize is the content and tech business came before esports. We started an esports team mostly because we're just competitive. We wanted to play. We're just doing it purely, as a casual, I want to play and have fun and I want to compete, not because I want to build a business out of it. Um, I want to see how good I am and I want to see how far I can go. And so we built our own teams to play on. Uh, and then part of that we're gonna use this team to create content for the website and market it. So the website was called solomid.net at the time. So we named the Team SoloMid to market the website. What people didn't know is in like 2010, 2011, imagine going to a tournament in Poland. You're putting five guys on a plane. Let's just say it's like $800 a piece for like the cheapest economy, and you book it way in advance. And then you're paying hotels. Obviously you're not gonna stuff five dudes in a room. You get three rooms. Um, to pay for flights and hotels and food, it's gonna cost more than if you took first place. You know, I think first place back then is anywhere from like 5,000 to like $10,000, and so going to tournaments wasn't really to um, make money. It was more of like we just want to play games. I mean, we want to play other gamers that are really good. I think at that time it was very grassroots, it was very real, and it felt very authentic. And the whole marketing thing is like, hey, this is just a cost offset. We're doing this because this is our dream. We want to do it uh, when we're still young and when we're still good. Little did we know, gaming and esports kind of just exploded, with the advent of streaming and broadcasting. Viewership for video games has exploded, and we're able to ride a second wave, right? We rode the first wave that was League of Legends, and we made an esports team to market our League of Legends apps and products. And then we what we found is like, hey, we have this business that's generating like about 1 million something a year. That's just really we're financing this esports team just for funsies, and it's a money losing venture. And we realized like, oh wow, this esports thing in itself is becoming behemoth, and it's starting to make money, and it's starting to make more money than our content business. And so at some point we had like a crossover, this is esports. It's climbing up like this. This is a tech website. And then esports just like took off. It went like asymptotic. And we're like, okay, we should focus on esports. It's really, really big. And that's kind of what we did from like 2012 to like 2020, 2021, still doing it. Um, I think the good thing for us is we had those two businesses in parallel, side by side, and neither stopped growing. And they grow at varying speeds through time, and we never really let off the gas on both. And so, very fortunate because sometimes the content business takes a dip and the esports goes up, and then sometimes esports take a dip and the content business goes up, and so we feel very stable because of that.
That's amazing. I really actually, before we continue, would you mind giving a really quick overview of what Blitz is? Because I know it's one of your core businesses.
Yeah. So Blitz is basically a desktop app. You download it, it lives on your computer. It detects the game that you're playing, like how Discord can kind of like detect, like, hey, you're playing League of Legends, your friends playing League of Legends, you should talk to each other, or you're playing like, World of Warcraft, or sometimes you can turn it off. But we kind of detect the game that you're playing. Obviously, we don't support all the games right now, but depending on the game that you're playing, the client will actually change to send you information and statistics relevant to yourself. And then it would make suggestions. It's like, hey, you're playing this specific character in this League of Legends match. This is what's on the other team. This is their damage makeup. This is the item build tuned with the highest winning percentage in your skill level against this comp. And so it's like basically a personalized assistant to you on a match by match basis to make it so you play the game better. The goal is to improve it and utilize more AI technology over time to make it so it becomes more precise and it's tuned specifically to you, and it identifies like, hey, these are your strengths and weaknesses, and make like specific recommendations to yourself.
Got it. Yep. That sounds super useful if you're trying to train to be a professional gamer or just be a better gamer in general. I know that after about 10 years of grinding, or I don't know exactly the amount of years, you decided to take a step back and be a high level strategic advisor and sort of take care of like high level duties, but left the day to day to Andy. What drove that decision for you? What was the catalyst there?
So I think for the longest time I was a CTO, COO, CFO, CMO, general counsel for the company, and I was a little burnt out. I was just basically, you're in a startup company, I think with 12 people. I think at the time, when I was running day to day, basically every aspect of the company, it got to as high as like about 25 people, and I'm like, okay. I remember walking into the office one day, and a couple of people came and said hi to me, and I got their two names flipped. I'm like, oh man, this is the first time in the history of the company that I got somebody's name wrong. And it was getting to the point where running and operating the company at that specific size was still doable, but I saw that it was gonna get to a point where I was gonna have more and more of that, where I'm gonna see faces that I don't recognize, and I don't know everybody on a first name basis, and I'm not doing that the personal review for every single person in the company anymore. Um, and so I realized right around then that it's like I do great in small teams or like a company like no bigger than 50. And I think we're on our trajectory at the time. We just like broke 50. And then we got to like 100 the next year, then 200 the year after that. And I'm like, okay, I see where this is headed. Um, I think my core strength is in a smaller team. And I think at that time, I was just ready to take like a little break. And so I stepped back in 2019, right before the pandemic. And I moved to basically a non-operating president role and just worked on the board. Um, and just kind of oversaw things from there. And it was more of just like a personal thing. I like smaller companies. I
Mhm.
like starting things and like seeing it grow. And I think once you get to a certain size, it organically just kind of grows. It's like a snowball. It rolls down the hill. You don't have to push anymore. It just rolls and it gets bigger. Sometimes it hits like the face of the mountain and it stops, but sometimes it keeps on rolling, it gets bigger. But it feels out of your control. You push the gas on the pedal as hard as you can. It won't go faster sometimes. Sometimes you pull your feet off and like it doesn't break. And so I think at that juncture, I felt uh, I didn't feel in control. So I was like, the best way is like, all right, let's come to terms with it.
And you had built this team up to that point, and you went from a solo entrepreneur, then an entrepreneur with your brother, and you guys built all of this out. Are there any core takeaways from your time in all these roles throughout the company around just team building and things that stuck with you that you'll repeat going forward if you ever do another company?
Yeah, I think the core thing that I learned is build things that people want, do things that you enjoy, because if you do things that you enjoy or your team enjoys, you're kind of always working but not working. You have that like lightning in a bottle moment just randomly at dinner or just sitting by the pool or just doing random things, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's great. When you do things that you like, it's kind of always on your mind. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but for productivity, it's amazing. It's because sometimes inspiration comes at like the unlikeliness of moments. And so I would say if you have the privilege to do things that you like, uh, it's a lot easier. Do things that you enjoy and you like, and always look for mini improvements. Like, hey, how can I do this little thing better? I think it's just being a little critical of yourself and be open. Well, I think it's kind of hard to describe, but usually people that are really critical of themselves, they like, okay, I thought this through. I know what I'm doing. I'm not going to listen to other people's opinion. I think what you need to do is you need to be critical of with yourself, but you need to validate too. Check in, have other people check in. It's like, hey, what do you think of this? Because we have in a lot of situations where it's like, hey, we thought of every scenario. This is the right path. You just head down the path. People come in and say, hey, have you thought of this? It's like, no, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. And then you just keep on going forward. And then you go and you like look to the side and you're like, huh, it looks way better over there. But to get over there, I have to go backwards. And then you just go forward. And I think to save yourself some time from going too deep, then having to go backwards, um, you know, take your time or like once in a while, just check in, like check in with your team. Make sure you hear some feedback. I think it's good to always be on the same. So in professional gaming, there's one thing that we talk about a lot in team fights, right? It's better that everybody makes the same wrong decision together in a team fight and go forward and charge through than to have five different opinions because you're just gonna get crushed. And so, what I think a good compromise to that is like, hey, we're gonna charge forward together, but every once in a while we're gonna check in and say, hey, let's assess the situation.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, this is good advice for me as well, because we're still at that 12 person stage right now, but I could easily see that snowballing into a larger team as we grow. I know that You're now quite a prolific investor, and I'd be curious to hear a little bit about how that started as a thing for you, what was interesting for you in that field, and then maybe what takeaways from building the company you carry with you now when you do invest in things.
Yeah, I came into a little bit of liquidity and I'm like, okay, this is pointless. I kind of don't want to just sitting there. Like what's the best way to deploy it? Obviously, if you just want to do it easy, set and forget it, then you just stick into the stock market and say, hey, I'm gonna take my 11%. I think at the time, what I really care about is I wanted to invest in things that's interesting and I wanted to invest in relationships. And so I was really just looking for founders that I really like, that that fits with my I don't know the word to describe it, but I think the young kids call it vibes. Right?
Yeah.
I found people that had good vibes, that were smart, that I knew were strong executors, and I was like, okay, I just believe in this guy and I believe in the story that he's saying, um, and I'm gonna back him. And I had this idea right around 2018 where the general framework for the way I thought about is I see so many talented people at big companies that is just so locked in place by politics. They know things that are best for the companies, but they can't get it done inside the company. And I see innovation stagnating at big companies. And what's going to happen is a lot of these guys are going to recognize that problem. They're going to pick up and go. And so anytime I find somebody that fits into that framework, like a smart, young, talented guy identifies a problem that can't solve at his existing company, and he says, "Hey, I want to leave this and build a product." I'm like, "I'm gonna back you because this company needs this product. If you can build this far enough, you can actually just go back and say, "Hey, big company, I saw this. I can save you like 100 million a year, or I can make you $100 million a year. Buy me." And so that was like a core part of my investment thesis early on. The second thing is I had a little bit of a thesis on basically content generation, likeness. Um, wasn't really thinking like AI, but was thinking of like we were working in basically the content management or like the agency space, and what you have is let's just say you pick up an esports player. They had 100 followers. You bring them in, you slap TSM on them, and then you say, hey, we back this person. The brand backs this person. We're gonna help this person grow, and we're gonna benefit from that. What you see is you grow this person with 100 followers. Now he's at 10,000, 100,000, a million, 5 million. You actually only benefit for the duration of that contract that he's under you, which usually lasts like 3 to 5 years. What happens after 5 years? It becomes like, hey, free agency. It resets to market rate. And even actually before agency, they're like, hey, I have 5 million followers. Why are you underpaying me? Like a lot of times talent don't understand that, for every 5 million follower success, there's another like 10 people that never takes off that we sink money into. And so there needs to be a balancing act. And so there's always that feeling of this company is ripping me off. They're taking a big chunk of my money. But the reality is we think of it as like a pool of talent. We've got to build everybody up. Sometimes you win big on this one, sometimes you lose big on this one. And I was like, okay, there's got to be a better way. And so I had a conversation with a buddy around like this issue. And he's like, have you guys thought about like what do you think about like digital influencers like little Michaela? I was like, honestly, I think it's a great idea because like the gorillas, I've never even seen them. I don't know what they look like as human beings, but I recognize every single one of the figurine characters or the cartoon characters, and I think that there's something here. And so I started investing in basically the digital influencers in the avatar space because I think that IP is gonna continue to grow and increase in value. IP never really dies or age, and you don't really have to. I'm trying to articulate this in a nice way, but let's just say you have a campaign, right? You bring it to a talent. You say, hey, they're gonna pay us $1 million. This is what we want you to do. Can you do this? And sometimes it's a bit of a negotiation, or they say yes and then they say no, and then they change their mind, and then you start and then you stop, and you have like sunk costs and you have cancellation costs. That doesn't really happen with an IP, right? You just say, hey, this is how we're gonna do it. This is it's clear on both sides, and so I did some investment in that space as well. So just yeah.
And after having looked at the gaming scene for so long and still being so active in it now in the investment role that you have or in the strategic role that you have, what do you see happening with the gaming industry? Are there any super clear trends? I mean, one that is spoken of a lot is just the growth of mobile gaming, but I'm curious if there's other
Mhm.
insights or things that you've seen or have on your mind.
Yeah, I think the gaming space, there's two parts, right? You see what happened with basically cheaper cameras, uh, photography camera, video cameras, webcams, and also like the democratization of like the distribution. So what I'm saying is you go back like 50 years, the only person or the only companies making content are really like TV stations or like the movie studios. Just because if you really want to make any type of content, nobody can afford a $20,000 camera or an experienced crew to walk around with like a microphone boom. The basically the moat was too big. And as the moat got smaller, what you saw is a diversity of content. You have like all sorts of forms of content on YouTube. You have like the 5-second TikToks to like the 30-second Instagram reel to the 2-minute YouTube video. And that's all enabled by like, moats being removed and walls being broken down. And you see that happening in video games, right? To make a video game of the past, you spend 5 years, three of it is just about building the tools and the platform, the tooling for building the game. And what you see is these toolings are becoming services. You have Unity where, you have a physics engine and a platform that you can build off of. You have asset that you can buy in stores. And over time, as more of these things become services, what you have is it backs into all you need is the creativity of an individual. Instead of having a team of like 50 or 100 people to make a game, you can actually build a pretty solid game with a team of 1 to 5. And so, what you have seen, and this is like historical, is as more of these tools come online, you see the amount of games popping up. So it does get more competitive. And so, I think in terms of genres of game, I anticipate more genres of game popping up. When I say genres of games, I say, hey, look at like a genre like shooters, like a hardcore shooter, like a Counter-Strike, and then you have something a little bit like less hardcore with more abilities, like an Overwatch, and then a hybrid with like, Valorant. And then you have another genre in MMO, you have a genre in MOBA. And so as you have more of these tools, you have more creativity and you have more of these genres popping up, and it's going to be more frequent. Um, and so you're going to see more smaller studios. But on the flip side, from like a data and marketing perspective and scale, I do see big companies having a big advantage just because um, it's really, really hard for a small company to identify who their audience is and market and get it to them, uh, and grow in a fashion where it's viral. Because so much of like a video game, especially a multiplayer game, is um, one thing you always have to solve for is matchmaking. If the amount of players playing the game the is too small, the play experience actually degrades. Because let's just say you have 10,000 players, but you have people of all different skill level. If you put like the best player with the worst player in the same lobby, the experience isn't going to be really good. So you need a big, big gradient of hundreds of thousands of players to make sure that the matchmaking experience is good. So that's one thing of like, hey, let's get a lot of noise and make it really viral at the beginning. The second thing is people are social. They want to play what other people are playing. You're right. It becomes a conversation piece. I was playing Diablo like probably every single weekend when it came out because all my friends are doing it and I'm on Discord and we're chatting and we're running dungeons together. And as that fizzles out, I have less of a pool to pull me back in the game. I'm still playing it, but you want games that are conversational, that your friends are playing, and then that becomes like another anchor for a conversation. And so like smaller studios are going to have problems with that. And so while you have more creativity, I think with the advantages in data and user acquisitions, it's building up another moat for like big game studio.
Super interesting. So the mode is shifting from the actual game creation to the distribution of the
Yeah.
game and marketing of the game. Really curious to see how that plays out. And since this is a crypto podcast to some degree, I work in crypto, I work in blockchain. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you think about crypto and blockchain and what compelled you to want to build a Web3 game in the first place.
Yeah, I think well, some disclosure, some facts. I am building a Web3 game. The concept is it's sort of like a top-down battle royale, extraction base. You know, I get asked, how did you get to that? Uh, I looked at so many different types of games and so many different types of genre, and I thought, what really fits into Web3? And a big element of that is like the economics or the value of the digital asset and how it can exchange hands inside a video game. And I kind of eliminated a couple of the games just because, I thought about what does it look like if we have chess? Like can you like create some type of gaming platform that rewards people that are good? Maybe you can like, create like matches as NFTs. You know how people reference like the greats in their match against each other's. And I thought it's like, oh man, I can't do this just because cheating is so prevalent in chess. And I thought, what other games where cheating is really prevalent, especially if you have something that's high stakes, right? If you're playing a game where you're like, hey, I wager $5 against you, but the guy on the other end, he's like, oh shit, I have a script or I have a map hack or I have an aimbot, you know, you're hyper incentivized to cheat for economic rewards. And so I went in, I dug in, I was like, oh, it's too expensive to make a hardcore shooters and to manage the anti-cheat on that. I think big companies spend like upwards of like $50 million a year, or I don't know a year, but just to build out the anti-cheat is like 50 plus million. And I'm like, there's no way. I can't do a hardcore shooter. Imagine you go in a game, you're carrying this sick ass legendary gun, and this guy has like a cheap ass like sniper rifle. He scopes one shot you in the head, you die, you drop it, he picks it up, he dips out. It's just it doesn't feel as bad if you know that there's competitive integrity, but it's really really hard to uphold. And that's something I'm like, okay, let's build a game and tune the game specifically to address this, especially if we want to introduce economic risk and reward in a competitive match. And so we kind of settled into like, hey, what does it look like if we do like a time-based, anticipation-based, like skill-based type game where it's not like a twitch reflex, but you're like, okay, I think this guy is going to move in the direction. I'm going to aim in the direction. He's going to walk into it, that type of thing. Or I'm going to unleash my ability and then queue up my team to follow on and like stun lock this person. And it's more about like timing and execution versus just flick. I'm gonna snap to his head, shoot him, he dies. And so what we're doing is like a time-based, reload-based. Imagine like Brawl Stars, where you have like a recharge on the abilities that you have, and skill shots based, sort of like in Brawl Stars and League of Legends too. And you're roaming around in a map, and the goal is there's many things you can do. You can say, hey, I want to act as a scavenger. You go through the map, you load in with a pickaxe, you go look for ores. You're like, hey, I want to gather like wood or whatnot, resource, because there's going to be a meta game outside of the game where you can accumulate and build other things. And maybe you say, hey, I want to go in and I want to run and gun and find people and kill them. And so you tune your character to the playstyle that you want, and you choose the risk and reward that you want to take on at the beginning of every match. So as a player, you say, hey, I'm gonna go in with this legendary spear or this legendary hammer or an epic sword. You choose what you want to risk because every single type of item that you equip into enhances your gameplay. But the caveat is you risk losing it. And so imagine like going into like a RuneScape wilderness and you're looking for resources and you're looking for people to kill to take their gear. And so people can say, hey, I'm gonna go in with cheapo gear, but I'm gonna jump people. I'm gonna die most of the time, but that one time I get that jump is gonna feel real good. So it's gonna make up for that 5 times that I jump and failed.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. What's the timeline on that right now? What stage of development are you guys in?
So we just finished building the platform. We're still building out basically weapons and abilities. And so I think the goal is hey, how do we build a platform to accomplish what we want? And then we built out a map editor because we understand that the map is going to change based on the size of the players that's going to be in. Is it going to be like a 2v2v2 with 50 players, or is it going to be like a 3v3v3 with like 60, or is it a 20-person lobby? Those are things we're trying to like kind of tune and figure out. I think what really makes the game fun is actually the core game loop of you jumping in the game, killing monsters, leveling up, and then finding people and fighting, and then saying, "Hey, this guy is too strong right now. Let's leave. Let's kill monsters, and let's retune or like reallocate stats. So when I find that guy again, I can fight him and have a better chance." And so you strategically choose when you take the fights.
Hmm.
Um, and so building out that loop, we're still fine tuning, but I would say probably 6 months from like a playable alpha publicly. And then, like with video game development these days, it could be like a year beta, 2 year beta. I don't even know. Some games just kind of stay in beta forever.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's the safer thing to do as well because if anything
Yeah.
happens, you'd be like, oh, we're still in beta though. So
Yeah.
I think that happens in crypto all the time. Crypto products.
I think the idea is it's a promise of, hey, we're building this and we want to improve it and make it better. And communicating to the user base is like, hey, it's a work in progress.
Hmm.
You look at League of Legends in 2009, it's so janky. It doesn't feel that good. It lags. People disconnect all the time. You disconnect, you can't jump back in. Uh, it's like the graphics has been 100% overhaul, right? It still captures the same feeling, but you're like, oh wow, this is actually really cool to look at now.
Nice. I'm super excited. Let me know when I can do some alpha testing. I want to definitely give it a spin.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and is the idea to integrate this with any of the other business lines, or is it a separate vertical?
Um, the idea is to use a synergy of our other businesses. We have a lot of users on Blitz. We're trying to identify which one of these users are Web3 friendly. We're introducing digital assets that can go on and off chain, potentially into Blitz already. Um, and so we're thinking, what does it look like if we could potentially use Blitz as a launcher? We're going to have soft currency on Blitz. It's basically like, hey, you have Blitz currency, you can buy TSM merch, or you can convert it and buy, skins in League of Legends, etc. What happens if we use this soft currency to incentivize people in our Web3 game for user acquisition? And so we're still trying to figure it out, but there's going to be a component where Blitz is going to be very important.
Got it. That makes a ton of sense. And you actually brought something up that I'm curious about your thoughts on, which is what about gamers and NFTs or digital collectibles? I know there's been a lot of pushback in the past. Do you see that changing? What do you think that's attributed to?
I think what happens is from the outside looking in, a lot of people got really burned in these things, and a lot of people in general use it as a casino or uh, I've gotten rug pulled so many times in NFTs, but I've found some gems too. And so I think what happens is there was definitely a time period where there's a lot of mania around NFTs where, I'm gonna buy this thing and I'm gonna retire on it. I'm gonna get rich. And a lot of people got burnt. And it only takes a few of the stories to really, really uh turn away people that are potentially interested. And so I think what really needs to happen is you need to onboard people slowly over time. And it can't be a promise of like getting rich quick. It's like I think that if you can onboard people one step at a time through one hoop at a time, instead of introducing like 6 walls of friction, you say, hey, this is one wall of friction, but we're gonna create, incentives for you to, learn about it, to overcome it slowly. Um, it's probably a better way. The way we're tackling it is we're actually just gonna position everything as a digital asset, and we make it so they turn into token or an NFT as an optional thing. So you go about your day playing this game as if it's a Web 2 game. If you know, spent money on it, you acquire skins that are no longer existing, that's super rare. Or you play and you go into a lobby, you kill a boss, he drops the equivalent of like a Thunder Fury. It's worth like 1,000, 2,000 bucks. You're like, holy shit. I'm like a 16-year-old. I'm playing this. I got this really, really lucky like lotto draw. Obviously, because I'm good, that's why I put myself in the best position to get it anyways. Um, you know, what does it look like if I want to sell this? Can I make money off this? He has the option of like, hey, I'm a Web 2 user. I don't know what Web 3 is. But now I'm financially motivated to figure this out. And then you can say, hey, this is how you do it. But obviously, you want to lower the friction from, I have this digital asset purely on Web 2. You know, what's the process of converting it into an NFT and then putting it on an open market?
Yeah, it makes so much sense. I mean, especially with how large black markets are for games and the friction people go through to sell in-game assets or in-game accounts. I think that this could be a no-brainer because it just reduces
Yeah.
that friction by a ton.
Yeah, I think it's if the problem with games is you want to have a game that has as many users as possible. And then like in game development or actually in any type of development, you think about like drop offs and friction, and you're like, the goal is how do I remove friction to make it a better experience so churn drops, right? I think there's a lot of friction right now in Web3 gaming, and I think that to go from full Web2 game to 100% on chain, that leap is too big. What you need to do is you need to onboard people one step at a time. Let's get them interested in it. Let's get them incentivized to learn about it, and let them onboard themselves one step at a time.
100%. I think in general, that's something that we need to do for this industry as a whole, rather than even just gaming. Is I think a lot of the problems we see is people try and force others deep into the crypto rabbit hole immediately without trying to figure
Yeah,
out intermediary steps for them to be able to understand what's going on. And
yeah,
it's a kind of shitty thing. I'm gonna have like a couple more questions. They're a bit more personal. I mean, one thing I'm really curious about, and I know we've talked about this a little bit before, is that you were sort of at the top of your game at this industry, which is one of the fastest growing industries in the world. You were able to find a lot of success. You were able to really plug into that world, but also you're one of the happiest people that I know. And I think that that isn't always the case with people who have or are in roles that you're in. And I'm curious how you've been able to create that connection between still staying at that high level on the work front, on the business front, but also have that sort of happiness and well-being with what you do on your day-to-day life.
yeah. I think it just comes back to gratefulness. Um, I think I have a lot of peers where, uh, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but the mindset is I got here because these are the things I did and I worked 100% for it. There's no luck involved. I think it's recognize how lucky I am and being grateful for that. And I'm always like looking and saying, oh man, I can't believe I got here. I can't believe the millions of things that has to like fall in place perfectly for me to have gotten here. There's millions of people in this world that can only dream to be in this position, and I stumbled upon it. It's like, sometimes I feel a little bit undeserving,
Hmm.
and so I'm truly just grateful. And so, uh, if you take half of it away, I wouldn't be upset.
Got it. I can totally see how that would put you in the mindset of not always needing to be, I need more, I need more, I need to be on top of this, I need to do the best investment, I need to make the most money.
Yeah. And I think we got here because we did things that we loved. We didn't play in tournaments to win $1 million. We played in tournaments and lost 1,000, $2,000 every time just on traveling costs because we wanted to play, we wanted to compete. We did it for the spirit of competition, and the money just kind of came in organically, and it was just icing. I would have still competed if the prize pool never grew to 1 million or 20 million. It's we were just very fortunate that it headed in that direction.
Yeah. Well, fortunate and also you guys positioned yourselves to be in the right place as the growth of something happened, or a tremendous growth of something happened. And sort of leading on to that, there's obviously this component that you're saying, which is the luck component, things lining up as they did for you guys with the moments in time that you guys were working on those things. But what are things you think that you controlled throughout this process that might be helpful for others to think about or know if they're on similar journeys themselves?
Yeah, I think things that I can control is how thoughtful I am, how hard I work, um, surrounding myself with people that sometimes you can't choose that, but being able filtering for the people with the right intentions, and having a good network that can give you good advice. I would say seek out a mentor. Find somebody that's done it or has done something adjacent, somebody that you trust that has good advice, because you can save so much time. There's everything that you've done, well, not everything. Usually like 70, 80% of your journey, somebody's done a piece of it, right? And then you're innovating on like a 10, 20%, and then it snowballs and it becomes even bigger. But early on the journey, there's just so many things that you need to do that are critical to a business that somebody just knows all your pitfalls that can be very helpful. And so I think very early on, I was too embarrassed to ask for help. Uh, people put me on a pedestal in terms of, oh wow, you did this thing, it's so great. And I'm like, fuck, I feel like an imposter. And I don't really want to admit to them that I'm an imposter. I don't know all these things. So I had to go and figure it out myself. I think what I should have done is like, hey, I got here and there's all these things that made it possible, but I actually don't know these specific things. And it'd be really nice if you can break it down for me.
Noted and noted. And my final question for you, Dan, is what is or are some indie games that you've tried that you've found fun that you can recommend? And what is or are your favorite anime shows?
Oh man, indie games. I'm a pleb right now. I haven't been playing too many indie games. The problem is I was playing Dark and Darker and I really loved it, and then Tarkov. But then they blew up. They became really viral, so they're not really indie anymore. Uh
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
yeah, I think in the true sense of indie, I'm a mainstream like pleb.
Well, your
Yeah.
game, I guess testing out your own game is kind of indie,
Yeah.
huh?
My game's pretty indie. I really like Slay the Spire. It's a little bit more indie, it's a little more dated, but they've really tuned it over time and they release more classes. That's if you like roguelike, that one's really good. Favorite anime, the one that I've been watching, shoot. There's a couple of categories. A couple years ago, I watched this anime called Your Name. It's very cute. I cried a little bit.
I cried too. It's so sad. It's so sad. Do you know that's
I'm trying.
Elon's favorite movie?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I literally cried it and I bought it for a bunch of my friends. Um, there's one on Netflix right now. I forgot the name, but the concept is this pretty similar to Your Name. Is this guy, he's really uncool. It's from a webtoon, by the way, and he gets bullied and he grows up really poor, and then he gets beat up a lot. And then one day he falls asleep and he wakes up and he's in this like guy that's like 6 foot something, really handsome. And then every time they fall asleep, they alternate bodies. And so the handsome guy goes to school during the day, and the ugly guy goes work in a convenience store at night. And the I don't know. It's 8 episodes. It's on Netflix. I'm trying to think of the name. Let me Google it really quick.
Okay, okay. Worth watching though.
It's 8 episodes. It's gonna take like three
Yeah.
hours, super fast. Bet you ChatGPT could have lookism.
Lookism. Oh,
Yeah.
I've seen it on Netflix. I've seen it.
Oh,
Okay,
you?
Lookism. I haven't watched it, but I've seen it show up on
Yeah,
Netflix.
yeah. I was surprised that I liked it. It's usually not in a category that I like.
Hmm.
Um, and like I like the basic stuff, like your Full Metal Alchemist, Hunter x Hunter, that type of stuff.
Yeah, same here. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Dan. This has been great.
Yeah, awesome.